Well, good afternoon and welcome back to the Dorset Council Northern Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Sherry Jesperson and I'm chair of this committee. Members present here today this afternoon are Councillors John Andrews, Tim Cook, Les Fry, Matthew Hall, Brian Heatley, Carol Jones, Stella Jones, Emma Parker, Mary Penfold, Belinda Rideout. And we have apologies for the afternoon session from Councillor Val Apothecary, if that could be recorded, please. Members, before we proceed any further, I need to take a vote to extend the meeting because we went beyond our 3 hours this morning. So I'm going to propose that we extend the meeting till 5:30, just to be on the safe side. Then we won't have to take another vote if we have a long afternoon. Could I ask please for a proposer and a seconder for that?
So proposed, Chairman.
That's proposed, Councillor Mary Penfold, seconded Councillor John Andrews. Thank you very much. I'm now going to put that to the vote. As I call your name, could you take whether you support this recommendation? Councillor Andrews? For. Councillor Cook?
For, but I may have to leave before the meeting ends.
Understood, Councillor Cook. Councillor Fry?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Heatley?
For.
Councillor Carol Jones?
For, but I too have a 4 o'clock meeting.
Right, understood. Councillor Stella Jones?
For.
Councillor Emma Parker?
For.
Councillor Mary Penfold?
For.
And Councillor Belinda Rideout?
For.
Excellent, thank you very much. Now we have got a lot of business still to get through this afternoon, colleagues. So without in any way wishing to curtail the debate, could I ask that we really focus on keeping our points very succinct and not repeating points that have already been made, just to aid our debate, because as you've heard that some colleagues will have to leave before we get to the end of this meeting. So now, just to remind you of where we are discussing agenda item 4B for 162 dwellings at Wincomb Lane in Shaftsbury. We've been told by the officer's report that the principle of development on this site is established. We've discussed an additional condition that prior to any construction above damp-proof course level, the developer will submit a statement indicating the sustainability features. Then this statement to be agreed by Dorset Council before any progress is made. We have had a proposal to support, but that did not include the new condition because that came before the new condition. So that's where we are. Now we're going to proceed straight to the debate, and I'm going to ask Councillor Tim Cook if he'd like to begin the debate. Councillor Cook, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have grave concerns about the access to this site. I asked the question earlier of the highways officer, and that I think was predicated on the premise of the decrease in traffic movements overall from the planning consent that you alluded to a moment ago. I'm thinking more of the traffic flow and the traffic that those road users are going to encounter going in and out of this site on a daily basis, sort of going to work and returning home. Wincomb Lane is a no-through road in to all effects, because it has the dairy at one end and it has either busy industrial area or residential area as you come into Wincomb Lane. There are considerable amount of movements of goods vehicles down to the dairy, predominantly tankers delivering milk and so on and other products. There are certainly traffic, there is congestion because of the narrowness of the street around about half a mile away from the proposed development. the residents either side don't have garages, and therefore they park their cars on Wincomb Lane, which restricts it to one lane. There is a school about a third of the way down past that, and on a number of occasions when I've been going down to travelling past that school, I have been caught in congestion because there'll be a tanker at one end and there'll be school traffic either coming or going, coming against. And on a couple of occasions I've been sitting there in a queue for 10 minutes while negotiations are conducted as to who goes first and who's going to get out of whose way. One of the objectors earlier, when we heard the statements of objection, mentioned the fact that she believed the original planning consent would be conditional on a spine road linking Wincomb Lane and going further north and northwest. This hasn't happened, and I don't know why this hasn't happened. It seems that we are constrained by what has gone before, but I would ask members to consider whether it would be possible to condition another route out of this development, because the current route, as I say, involves congestion at peak hours and then going through a busy industrial area to get to the 350, either that or going through another residential area to get to the 350.
Can I ask Steve if he'd be able to comment on that, Steve Savage, because yes, this is the congestion on Wincomb Lane. Is that grounds for refusal?
Thank you, Chair. Well, the first thing here is that Wincomb Lane is in the process of being widened to 5.5 metres. And we saw in the photos that Ross provided us with is that these works are ongoing and due for completion very soon. They're subject to a Section 278 process, which is included in audit procedure. 5.5 metres is sufficient room for a large tanker and a car to pass. So it's been deemed by the Highway Authority that that's appropriate and acceptable at this location. If people are parking on Wincomb Lane and vehicles can't pass, then they'll be causing obstruction. That will be a police matter to enforce. The original consent was not conditional on the spine road being provided, and whilst I'm not a planner, I'm sure that one of my planning colleagues could confirm that we're not in the situation here where we can condition an alternative route. We're looking at the application in front of us. Right. And the simple fact, as I see it, is that it was granted consent for 191 dwellings. With the widening works required on Wincomb Lane, we're now on a lesser number of dwellings with the same widening work, which is literally done now. So I don't think we have any highway grounds for refusal. That would be the advice I would have to give the committee chair.
That's very clear and unequivocal and very helpful. Thank you very much. And you're absolutely right. Of course, we making a new route out of the site would not be something that could be conditioned, because that would be a significant change to the application. Hannah will jump in and correct me if that's not right, but that's my understanding. So the highway steer is that as far as highways is concerned, there are no grounds for refusal.
I would not, whilst not contradicting at all what the highways officer has just said, I appreciate that the widening work is going ahead in a certain location. What I'm talking about is just to the northwest of the junction with Sweetman's Road, 10 acres King Alfred's Way. There is no double yellow lines. I'm not talking about traffic that is there just to drop people off from school. I'm talking about 2 rows of parked cars either side, which in my view, and I think in the residents' view, they are perfectly entitled to do, which then restricts the width of the carriageway in a place where it is not being widened down to 1.5 car width. And it is a negotiation basis. Because there are parked cars either side, either one or the other drivers coming towards one another have to stop. And if
I'm feeling we're straying into stuff here that's not necessarily planning. That's my
I would pick it up on NPPF National Planning Policy Framework 108B, which says which insists on safe, suitable, and sustainable access to the site. I would question whether that was absolutely true in this case, and I want members to bear in mind whether they're minded either way to support or reject this. I don't believe that suitable access can be guaranteed at all times. However, what I also want to pick up on is the strong adherence, should members be minded to approve this development. We absolutely have to go with the senior planning architect and the design statement that is in front of us. I would like to strengthen that by saying if we can use vernacular Shaftsbury greenstone in more quantity, I would be very happy, and I think the residents of Shaftsbury would be very happy that this development, should it go ahead, is built in a way that complements the town. Because at the moment, what I see in front of us is a housing development that possibly does as much as it needs to get approval, but I would strongly ask that the planning officers and sit down with when the design comes forward, that we absolutely make sure that what we are going to get is Shaftesbury, not generic.
Yes,
please.
Very good point, because this is what we always want, isn't it? Not generic. Ross or Hannah, is there anything more that we can do? I mean, I would remind members that we have been told that a lot of work has already been done on this design, and Ross or Hannah might want to just remind us of this point, and that it's in officers' view, it's rather better than the design that we started with. But is there anything more that we can do to introduce Shaftesbury stone, or is that an ask too far? Ross.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again, Councillor. One of the planning conditions, excuse me, requires submission of all details in terms of external materials, and I think it would be an officer aspiration for that to include the Shaftesbury green sandstone. So we will consider the submission if of those details if this application is approved. What I can do, Chair, if it's okay, if I can share the material site plan, which indicates locations of in terms of brick and stone and slate, and so on. Okay, thank you. Just bear with me. So here we have the material site plan. So I'm sorry it's not zoomed in very much, but the dwellings covered in red are obviously red brick. The orange dwellings are a lighter buff brick, and the dwellings marked yellow in certain landmark locations are proposed to be stone. Now, as I said, the materials condition will confirm the precise specification. So in terms of the blue and grey circles, the blue circles are delineate roof tiles, and the grey circles show slate as well. So I think hopefully this gives you a flavour of the materials mix, just in broad terms, in terms of where the landmark stone buildings would be, and the proportion of red brick and slate and so on. So I hope that's helpful.
So you see, Councillor Cook, we have got some Shaftsbury or some stone anyway at key points. Not as much, I appreciate, as you would like, you and I would like to see, but it is in there. Does that satisfy you?
I always like to see more, Chairman. Yes, we have done well, and I thank the officers for doing what they have done. I would always say, can we do more? Because we want development. Should we have development, we want it to look right for the town. And I think I pick up on what Councillor Heatley said in the questions, that with the solar panels, to consider identifying suitable areas for renewable low carbon energy sources from NPPF 151. I would hope that we can condition that a little bit further to include specifics that we want. And I appreciate we haven't got a policy in Dorset, but if NPPF is referencing these issues, can we not use that as the policy?
Can we stick to the stone for a minute? Sure. Ross, is there anything what I think I might, if the committee was willing, what I might like to add to this condition on the materials, that something to say that because I know that when push comes to shove, these are negotiations, and we wouldn't wish to see the amount of stone work here reduced, so it's only just about enough to make it acceptable, but we wouldn't want to see that reduced. So if we could just put a note in the minutes, even if it's not a condition, to say that it's the view of the committee that we're pleased to see that use of stone in there, but it's considering that Shaftesbury is famous for its stone, that's the least we would expect to see there, and we would hope not to see this reduced before the development is actually done. That's something, at least, Tim.
Yes, and
doesn't get us more, but at least it's.
Can we also say condition no use of render?
Is there any render in this one?
There's no render elevations proposed.
No, all right.
Yeah, so that's not an issue.
So we can also put in the minutes. It's not a condition, but because I'm conscious we mustn't tie officers' hands too much, but we could also put in our minutes that we would not wish to see render introduced at a later date into this. You're nodding, Ross. Does that mean that that's a reasonable thing to say?
Thank you, Chair and Councillor. Yes, I mean, the intention of this plan is to establish an acceptable mix of different materials. So, and then the conditional details just confirms the specific specification. So, I don't envisage that that to have more of one type of material than as shown, or less, as the case may be.
Well, if we just put that in our minutes, that's a little bit of ammunition for you should you find yourself having that discussion, for what it's worth. Okay, thank you. But I don't think there's much we can do, Tim, to introduce more stone at this point.
We can always ask the question, I'm sure.
We can, exactly, we can, but yes. Phil Crowther is asking, Ross, is the current plan in the plan's condition?
Okay, if I just stop sharing my screen, I'll double check that.
Yes, okay. While we're just checking that, Tim, was what further points you wanted to make? Or yes.
NPPF 151 states to consider identifying suitable areas for renewable low carbon energy sources. I think that goes a little bit further than what Councillor Heatley was proposing for the condition on the developer telling us why or why not they have decided not to put what we would consider sufficient low carbon emission measures in place. I don't know, Councillor Heatley, whether I can ask through you, Chair, whether we could strengthen that or not, whether he would be happy.
Yes, I don't know if Councillor Heatley wants to come in at this point. I think we need to get a definitive conclusion on this, because we're going round and round. So, but thank you for raising it. Hannah, if you're there, what can we, or Ross, what more can we do in this area with this particular application in terms of sustainability features, renewable heat sources and so forth? Is there more that we can do? Clearly the committee is minded to do as much as we possibly can, as much as is within our gift, to get a strong statement here. Could you advise us?
Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I think councillors were minded to propose potentially a condition asking for a sustainability statement, is where we left that.
I reminded us of that.
So
yes.
I think that would include sustainability measures. We could say to include some form of renewable technology, but not specify what one, because we don't obviously know what's proposed. Because they have indicated through building regs they're going to provide that, so it doesn't seem like it's something that would be difficult for them to comply with. So we could have something along the lines of, prior to the commencement of the development above damp course level, a sustainability statement which shall include measures, renewable technology measures, shall be submitted to the local planning authority for approval in writing, and the construction of the dwelling shall fully accord with the approved statement.
That does it for me. Does that do it for you, Tim? I mean, that's probably as much as we're going to get.
Yes, I was going to say, if that is the strongest we can put it, then let's put it as the strongest that we can.
Yes, it means that they have to come back to Dorset Council Planning with their sustainability measures. I'm going to ask Anna Lee to come in and comment now.
Thank you, Chairman. And I was going to make very similar points to those that Hannah has just raised. I do think I fully appreciate the concerns raised by members. I do think that the condition has just read out is as far as we can reasonably go based on current policy. So that would be my comment. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So I'm just going to ask Brian Heatley, Councillor Heatley, who was the other person who was raising this. Are you happy that with where we are now, if we add this condition?
I'm contented.
Not happy. Are you content?
I'm content.
Thank you very much. Okay, good. I think that was very helpful. Thank you. But I think we've nailed that one down. That's excellent. So we now, is there anybody else who has anything to say?
I do have one more.
I beg your pardon. Yes, carry on, please, Councillor Cook.
It's working back to what we were talking about regarding the AONB, the dark skies policy. Should members be minded to pass this application, I would like to condition that we can require blinds to all upward facing windows, so Velux windows or roof lights and the like. Is that possible? Because given its proximity to the corner of the AONB and their dark skies policy, can we condition that, or did we agree that we can't?
I'm going to ask advice on this one, because committee members will remember that we have fallen foul of blinds before, when we conditioned blinds and then our condition was subsequently overturned. Hannah, what can we say with regard to the dark skies policy? Is really important, and it's a point well made, but can you give us a steer as to how we can address this?
I think I'd caution against blinds, Councillor. It's a really important point, as Chair has just raised, the dark skies policy and the setting of the AONB and the impact that light spill can have. The problem with insisting on blinds is enforceability, because you can have blinds there, but we haven't got the ability to enforce that people close the blinds, so they won't be meeting that objective. I think what councillors need to consider is, if you feel really strongly about the fact that this development could have an impact on the dark night sky reserve, which is obviously a significant consideration, there is the ability to take away permitted development rights for openings, for new openings such as roof lights, that would have more of an impact, because then planning permission would be required for new openings in the roof slopes. I'd caution, I just would make sure that councillors consider that there is sufficient grounds to do so across the development, because there has to be good justification for a move-in permitted development rights. But you do have the AO and B objectives and the management plan as a consideration there. So if you did feel that there was further limits on the impact of light spill that was required from this development, then that's something you could consider legitimately as removing permitted development rights for roof openings such as roof lights.
Given that we're just looking at 100 and whatever it is houses, not allowing further windows seems as quite a small victory here. But if people think it's worth it, then by all means let's consider that.
Exactly right. It has to have the full, good justification to do so, because there will be some light spill from this develment because there will be windows in there. I think the roof slopes are obviously at a higher level and have the potential to be viewed from a longer distance. But that you need to just carefully consider whether you think that would be necessary to make the development acceptable, having regard to the A and B objectives, whether it's a reasonable measure to take or not.
Right. And that would be on the grounds of in the light of the MB to reduce further, to guard against further light pollution, because I think we have to acknowledge that there is a measure of light pollution already. Okay, that's a possible condition. I can see that Councillor Cook would like that. Is there anybody who would like, before I come on through, is there anybody put in there in the chat bar now, please, if you really don't want to pursue this further lighting condition?
Chair, I do not want to pursue that. I think it's unnecessary, bearing in mind you'll have street lighting there as well. I think it's disproportionate to the impact of 162 houses.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful, because
I'm happy to propose this development.
You've already done that.
That's good.
No, that's good. Okay, we're going to have to hold this because I don't want to be, because I can't see you. I can't see who's nodding in favour of the permitted development rights and who's not. Belinda, Councillor Rideout has now indicated that she would be happy with that. What I'm going to do now, Councillor Pryor, I think you were about to say that you're going to propose, which you've already done, which is excellent. Councillor Stella Jones, did you want to make a comment, please?
I was only going to comment on the lights. I think I don't think we can have this condition, because people can actually put security lights in their gardens and you can have all that pollution and not stop that at all.
Okay. I've had Councillor Andrews and Councillor Carol Jones. Do you have a view on the lighting condition? I need to know how the committee feels about this particular condition at this point.
No, I go with exactly what Councillor Jones has just said. Stella has just said.
Yeah, so you're not keen on it?
No.
I concur. I concur with John and with Les.
I think the majority of the committee seem to be saying that while they're sympathetic to this thing that Councillor Cook, they're not really in support of it. I think the view of the committee seems to be that it's disproportionate and would in any case be it's disproportionate in the context of the fact that we are putting in 162 houses, so there's a measure of light pollution here already. Committee, somebody jump in if that's not the feel of the meeting, the mood of the meeting, because it's so difficult to do this when I can't see any of you, but that's what I'm picking up, that you're not anxious to pursue this particular condition.
I would agree with you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think I've heard enough people say. Councillor Cook, it doesn't look as if you've taken the committee with you on that one, which is fair enough, but we are still now. I have right now, Councillor Fry, you did propose to accept this, but we have since had, since your proposal, we've had a condition which Hannah has outlined for us, which seems to me actually quite a sensible one, about the a condition for them to come back with a sustainability report. Hannah, would you like to read out again for the committees, because I now need to get the view of the committee whether or not they want me to take this forward with this extra condition or without it. So this is the extra condition that we could put in if we choose, members. Hannah, would you just remind us of it?
Thank you, Chair.
Quite a sensible condition.
Prior to the commencement of the development above damp course level, a sustainability statement to include renewable technology measures shall be submitted to the local planning authority for approval in writing. The construction of the dwellings shall fully accord with the approved statement, and the reason would be to ensure that the development includes sustainability features.
Okay.
Sounds good to me, Chair. I'm happy to add that in, and I think it makes sense, and let's go forward, and hopefully that sort of condition can go into all serious applications, because I know there are other people watching this meeting.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. So we've had a proposal that we should support this application with the additional condition. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Councillor John Andrews is seconded. I'm now going to put that to the vote for our minded to decision. When I call your name, please tell me whether you're for or against. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Cook?
Reluctantly for.
Councillor Fry?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Heatley?
For.
Councillor Carol Jones?
For.
Councillor Stella Jones?
For.
Emma Parker?
For.
Councillor Mary Penfold?
For.
Councillor Belinda Rideout?
For.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. I would now turn to Anna Lee. That's our minded to decision. Anna, how will you decide?
Thank you, Chairman, and I confirm I heard the full presentation and the debate. I concur with the Office recommendation set out in the report and the committee's minded to resolution, and so my decision is this application will be approved. That's subject to the section 106 with the amended heads of terms as set out in the update sheet, also subject to conditions including the additional condition discussed in regard to a sustainability statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You see how brilliant it is when you get somebody who knows what they're doing, rattling all that off. So much more fluent than me. Thank you very much indeed, Anna. Right, members, we're now moving on to 3 applications in a row for roof-mounted solar panels on Dorset Council schools. And these are similar but not identical, so we will be considering them one at a time because they all have slightly different recommendations. The first up then we have agenda item 4D, Chesilbourne Village School. Hugh Williams is going to give us his report. Hugh. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Share the slideshow.
That's lovely. It's on the screen now. Thank you, Hugh.
Lovely. There we are. Great. This application is made by Dorset Council and relates to land owned by Dorset Council. It was reported to committee in accordance with the Dorset Council's constitution for such applications. There have been no objections received to the proposed development. Chesilbourne Village School is located adjacent to the junction between the C34 and Drake's Lane in the northern part of the village of Chesilbourne, with the unclassified Northfield House Lane and Campion Cottage on Northfield House Lane to the north. The site is shown edged red on the submitted location plan and extends to approximately 950 square metres. The main school building comprises an attractive structure with brick walls beneath a tiled roof and brick stack. The surrounding area is residential and semi-rural in character. The school is located outside of the development boundaries defined in the adopted local plan and within the Dorset area of outstanding natural beauty. In exercising or performing any functions in relation to or so as to affect land in an area of outstanding natural beauty, local planning authorities must have regard to the purposes of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the AONB. National planning policy provides that great weight is to be given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty in AONBs, with the conservation and enhancement of wildlife and cultural heritage also important considerations in these areas. These themes being echoed in development plan policy. Campion Cottage is a Grade 2 listed building, the earliest parts of the building thought to date from the early 18th century, and the building being of both architectural and historic interest. In considering whether to grant planning permission for development which affects a listed building or its setting, the local planning authority must have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting, or any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses. National planning policy provides that in considering the impact of the proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, great weight should be given to the asset's conservation, and that any harm to or loss of the significance of a designated heritage asset should require clear and convincing justification. These themes are again echoed in development plan policy. There's a playground area separating the main school building from Campion Cottage. The cottage is in residential use, and there is little in the way of enclosure along the school boundary with the cottage. But there is a boundary wall and vegetation, overgrown vegetation along the school boundary with Northfield House Lane. Further residential properties are located on the east side of the C34, and the village hall is also on the opposite side with open space to the south. A public footpath joins Drake's Lane roughly opposite the northern limits of the school site. This photograph is from the C34 looking northwest towards Northfield House Lane and to Campion Cottage, with the boundary wall of the school and its overgrowing vegetation apparent. Now, this view is from the other side of the school in Drake's Lane, looking north, with filtered views of the school building through the boundary vegetation. And the next shot is through this gap in the vegetation, illustrating the relationship between the rear of the school building and Campion Cottage, with its overlooking first floor windows and the boundary wall of the school and the vegetation above. This shot is from the public footpath adjoining Drake's Lane, looking east towards the back of the school site, much of the building being screened by intermitting vegetation. The aerial photograph further illustrates the mixed character of the setting, with countryside and open space to the west and south, residential development to the north, and the village hall, further residential development to the east. Planning permission is sought for the installation of a total of 28 roof-mounted solar panels on various roof planes of the main school building, together with associated infrastructure. The panels will be installed in 7 on the southeastern and southwestern facing roof planes, They'd be of standard manufactured design with a black frame and would be mounted to lie flush with the roof planes. Um, 11 panels would be installed in 2 arrays on the front elevation, but no panels are proposed on the roof planes facing towards Campion Cottage. In the photograph, panels would be installed above the ground floor window and above the 2 hipped gables of the taller windows. The southwestern facing panels would face towards Drake's Lane, but would not be particularly prominent other than in the views through the boundary vegetation. Panels being proposed on this roof plane here. Or above, or when seen above the boundary vegetation, again, there's panelling proposed on the end elevation here. The prevailing planning policy context is set out in the application report. Policy INT1 of the adopted local plan states that there will be a presumption in favour of sustainable development that will improve the economic, social and environmental conditions in the area. And outside of the defined development boundaries, policy SUS2 allows for alterations to existing buildings for education related development and for proposals for the generation of renewable energy. Policy COM10 of the adopted local plan provides that proposals for generating heat or electricity from new renewable energy sources other than wind will be allowed wherever possible, providing that the benefits of the development, such as the contribution towards renewable energy targets, significantly outweigh any harms. Policy COM11 further states that permission will only be granted provided any adverse impacts on the local landscape, townscape, or areas of historical interest can be satisfactorily assimilated, that the proposal minimises harm to residential amenity, and that adverse impacts upon designated wildlife sites, nature conservation interests, and biodiversity are satisfactorily mitigated. Adverse impacts on amenity by reason of glint or glare is considered to be unlikely, and no adverse impacts on designated wildlife sites, nature conservation interests, or biodiversity are anticipated. Information submitted in support of the application indicates that the solar panels would have a combined power generating capacity of approximately 10 kilowatts, resulting in an annual saving of approximately 2,097 kilograms in carbon dioxide equivalents. The carbon savings associated with the proposed installation would therefore make a modest but nonetheless a valuable contribution to cutting greenhouse gas emissions, assist the transition to a low carbon future, and help improve resilience. Information submitted in the application indicates that the installation would also likely provide energy cost savings. There are therefore small but meaningful public benefits weighing in favour of granting planning permission. With the panels proposed to be located on the roof slopes facing away from Campion Cottage, it is considered that their presence would not unacceptably detract from the character or the appearance of the area, or from the setting of or heritage significance of Campion Cottage. Overall, the proposal is for a sustainable form of development that is in accordance with the development plan. No further representations have been received relating to the application, and there are no other updates to either the application or to the published report. It is recommended that the committee ought to be minded to grant planning permission subject to conditions set out in the report, and should recommend that the head of planning determines the application accordingly. And that concludes my presentation on this application.
That's great, thank you very much. Oh, I've got a strange echo. Can you hear the echo? Can we do something about that, please? Thank you. It's very clear, as always, from you, Hugh. Thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any questions on this application? Nobody. It's so clear. Nobody has anything else. That's excellent. That's as it should be. So, anybody would like to raise any points about it? No. Well, then I'll go straight to saying, could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Jones, you've been quiet. Would you like to propose something here?
Yes, I'll propose it.
Thank you.
I'll second it, Chair.
Sorry, you have to give me your names. Who's seconding?
Les Fry.
Right. Right, I've had a proposer and a seconder. We're putting this to the vote as is without more ado. That's very helpful. As I call your name, tell you how you would like to vote. Councillor Andrews.
4.
Councillor Cook.
4.
Councillor Fry.
4.
Councillor Hall.
4.
Councillor Heatley.
4.
Councillor Carol Jones.
4.
Councillor Stella Jones.
4.
Councillor Emma Parker.
4.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
4.
And Councillor Belinda Rideout.
4.
That's lovely. That's duly carried. Could we then turn to Anna Lee to give us her decision? That you've heard our minded to decision, Anna.
Thank you, Chairman. I concur with the minded to resolution, and this application will be approved subject to conditions. Thank you.
Splendid. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on then without more ado to St Abbas C of E School. And again, Hugh, if you'd like to give us your presentation on this one.
Again, Chair. St Abbas, sorry, the application is again made by Dorset Council, relates to land owned by Dorset Council and is reported to committee in accordance with the Council's constitution. Dorset Council's Design and Conservation Officer has identified design and heritage concerns in relation to the development as proposed. St Abbas Church of England School is located on the western side of Duck Street, towards the northern edge of the village of St Abbas. The school site is shown edged red on the submitted location plan and extends to approximately 1,400 square metres. The remains of the Benedictine Abbey are located off to the northeast, south of Giants Hill. The original or main school building is a Victorian construction and adjoins the pavement in Duck Street. The building has been extended to its rear and abuts a residential property to its south, the residential property being in separate ownership and is at number 11 Duck Street. Further residential properties are located along Duck Street to the south of the school site and beyond the school's small playground to the north. There are small outside learning play areas within the school site. The playground to the north of the main school building, and on the opposite side of the road is the Duck Street playground and adjacent playing field, which includes public footpaths that cross the adjacent stream and lead towards the Abbey precinct. The school site is located entirely within the designated Dorset area of outstanding natural beauty and also within the St Abbas conservation area. This slide shows the statutory listed buildings marked by red stars. The school building being here, the nearest listed building being further down Duck Street to the south, and there being numerous other listed buildings in Duck Street and elsewhere within the conservation area, including Grade 1 listed buildings within the Abbey precinct and with the scheduled remains beyond. In exercising and performing any functions in relation to or so as to affect land in an area of outstanding natural beauty, local planning authorities must have regard to the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the area. A national planning policy provides that great weight is to be given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty in AONBs, with the conservation and enhancement of wildlife and cultural heritage also important considerations in these areas. In the exercise of any functions under the Planning Acts with respect to any buildings or other land in a conservation area, special attention must be paid to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of the conservation area, and in considering whether to grant planning permission for development which affects a listed building or its setting, the local planning authority must have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting or any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses. National planning policy provides that in considering the impact of proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, great weight should be given to the asset's conservation, and further provides that any harm to or loss of the significance of a designated heritage asset should require clear and convincing justification. These themes, both in relation to the AONB, the conservation area and the listed building, all again being reflected in development plan policy. The original school, or the school and the adjacent dwelling, are not statutorily listed buildings, but are identified in the Sir Nabas Conservation Area appraisal as being locally important buildings and are therefore recognised as non-designated heritage assets. The citation in the Conservation Area appraisal notes that the buildings are an attractive and good entry to the conservation area when entering Duck Lane from the north, and indicates that the heritage significance derives principally from the historic and architectural interest of the original built fabric. The aerial photograph further illustrates the site context with the original school building and the adjoining dwelling directly fronting Duck Street. The later additions at the rear, school grounds, the play park and recreation ground opposite, and dwellings to the north and to the south. The application proposal is for the installation of symmetrical arrays of solar panels on the front and rear roof planes of the main school building, together with associated infrastructure. The panels would be of a standard manufactured design with a black frame and white backsheet. The panels would be mounted to lie flush with the roof planes and would be set back from the ridge line to avoid increasing the overall height of the building. The panels on the eastward facing front elevation open to view from locations along Duck Street. In this photograph, the rendered building is number 11 Duck Street, the flint banded building being the school, so the panels would run the full length of the eastern roof plane, articulating around the chimney stack. The panels would be particularly apparent in views from the south and slightly less prominent from the north, owing to the angle of the road and of the building, but would be clearly visible from the public areas on the opposite side of Duck Street. Scaling policy context is set out in the application report. Policy INT1 of the adopted local plan states that there will be a presumption in favour of sustainable development. in policy SUS2 provides that within the defined development boundaries, residential employment and other development to meet the needs of the local area will normally be permitted. Policy COM 11 of the adopted local plan provides that proposals for generating heat or electricity from renewable energy sources other than wind will be allowed wherever possible, providing that the benefits of the development, such as the contribution towards renewable energy targets, significantly outweigh any harm. Policy COM 11 further states that permission will only be granted provided any adverse impacts on the local landscape, townscape or areas of historic interest can be satisfactorily assimilated, that the proposals minimise harm to residential amenity, and that adverse impacts upon designated wildlife sites, nature conservation interests and biodiversity are satisfactorily mitigated. The Made Neighbourhood Plan provides that planning applications for smaller scale renewable energy proposals should only be considered if the technology is suitable for the location and the scale, form, design and materials used can be satisfactorily assimilated into the local landscape or areas of historical importance. Adverse impacts on amenity by reason of glint or glare are considered unlikely, and no adverse impacts on designated wildlife sites, nature conservation interests or biodiversity are anticipated. Information submitted in support of the application indicates that the solar panels would have a combined power generating capacity of approximately 30 kilowatts, resulting in an annual saving of approximately 6,291 kilograms in carbon dioxide equivalents. The carbon savings associated with the proposed installation would make a modest but nonetheless a valuable contribution to cutting greenhouse gas emissions, assist the transition to a low carbon future and help to improve resilience. Information submitted in the application also indicates that the installation would likely provide energy cost savings. Such cost savings would help to sustain the use of the historic school building for an appropriate and publicly beneficial purpose. There are therefore small but meaningful public benefits weighing in favour of the granting of planning permission. Installing solar panels to both sides of the roof of the original school building will negatively impact the architectural and aesthetic significance of the school, will harm its setting and will detract from the character and appearance of the conservation area. As set out in the application report, the heritage statement submitted in support of the application acknowledges low levels of less than substantial harm to heritage significance, and in response to the application, Dorset Council's Conservation and Design Officer has noted that the prominence of the roofscape, particularly noted the prominence of the roofscape, commenting that installing reflective solar panels across the length of the eastern slope will create a dominant, visually intrusive, incongruous element in the street scene. The Design and Conservation Officer has suggested that to overcome their objection, the applicant be advised to remove the proposed solar panels from the eastern roof slope, thereby reducing the harm to the setting and to the character and appearance of the conservation area. That suggestion was put to the applicant, but the request made that the application be reported to committee for the committee's consideration and subsequent determination. You have before you a written statement submitted on behalf of the applicant service and also a written statement from the school council. Harm to the heritage significance of designated assets carries considerable weight and importance in decision making and is to be accorded great weight. In this instance, such harm is exacerbated by further harm to the heritage significance of non-designated but locally important buildings. The recommendation is for a partial conditional grant of planning permission. It is open to the council to issue a partial grant of planning permission with limitation imposed by means of planning condition, provided that such action is not prejudicial and so long as any change to the proposed development is not substantive in nature. As the recommended conditions only amend the proposed development by way of reduction, I am satisfied that precluding the installation of solar panels on the eastern roof plane by condition as recommended would not be a substantive change to the proposed development, and that no third-party interests would be unacceptably prejudiced. With the imposition of the recommended conditions, I'm satisfied that the public benefits associated with renewable energy generation would both justify and significantly outweigh the much lower level of harm arising from the less prominent installation, rendering an otherwise unacceptable development acceptable. Save for the submission of written statements to the committee, no further representations have been received relating to the application, and there are no other updates to either the application or to the published report. It is recommended that the committee should be minded to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the report, and should recommend that the head of planning determines the application accordingly. That concludes my presentation.
Helpful. Thank you very much indeed. We have one representation to hear. I have that echo back again from the Dorset Council Asset Management team, and I understand that this representation refers to this application and the one that follows, so we'll hear it just once. Is that right? Could we hear from Dorset Council Asset Management team, please?
So do you want me to read this?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
please.
Derek Moss, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, this statement is about the application for solar panels on St Abbas and Stickland schools, where the amount of solar PV outlined in the application is at risk of being significantly reduced based on the aesthetic considerations of conservation officers. DC has been successful in a grant application for carbon reduction technology installations, which is 100% funding, so a once in a lifetime opportunity. Indeed, subsequent phases of this funding scheme will now require significant match funding. The key grant restriction is that it has to be spent, i.e. technologies installed by the end of March 2022, in line with the need for urgent climate action. Any solar PV not installed now is at significant risk of not being installed for many years. The extra panels, as well as doubling emissions reductions, would help reduce running costs for the schools, which in turn allows the installation of renewable heating systems. This is because renewable heating systems are more expensive to run than fossil fuel ones, and no schools can accept increased running costs when their budgets are already under such pressure. Without the full PV arrays, the conversion to renewable heating is at serious risk of not proceeding now or in the future, and so the potential effect of reducing the size of the installations is greater than just the direct carbon savings from the PV panels. For these sites, there are no suitable alternative renewable heating technologies available, as they are off the gas grid instead of using oil. Solar panels are temporary and can be taken down at the end of their useful life to return to the roof to its original state. There will be no physical damage to the buildings. DC has recognised the urgency and importance of the climate issue by declaring a climate emergency. This implies that we have acknowledged that we can't just keep on doing the same things we have always done that have created the emergency. Something needs to change, such as giving emissions reductions more weight in planning decisions when compared to temporary changes to aesthetics. This is arguably a very simple and cheap thing to do, but the first of many changes that need to occur. Whilst we fully respect the need to maintain aesthetics in some circumstances, there is a need to balance that against the climate and ecological emergency. In these instances, we feel that the benefit of the solar installation is far greater for the local community, Dorset and beyond, than the subjective effect on aesthetics. The action taken on climate change now will determine the outcomes for the planet and future generations who inhabit it. We would urge the planning decisions taken today to place the necessary weight on these considerations and the proposed planning applications, which are very much in line with the recognised science and emergency declared at both international and national level and by Dorset Council.
Thank you very much indeed. I understand we also are going to hear the statement from the Schools Council for St Abbas School. I knew we were having one from Stickland. Are we having one for this school as well? Right, yeah. Off you go.
Okay, we are the School Council from St Abbas CEVA First School, and we have heard that some people are not happy about our school having solar panels on both sides of the school roof. We want to help our environment as much as we can and do what we can to stop our earth getting polluted. We are still quite young, and we would want the world to grow up in to be a healthy place for us, as well as our children and their children too. Having solar panels on both sides will not only help keep our world healthy, but will also help reduce the cost of our bills, and we could spend that money on resources to help our learning. We would like to do everything we can to help our world, no matter how small. We feel so lucky that someone would pay for solar panels to enable us to do this. Our vision is to be the best we can, and feel that by caring for our environment, it enables us to do the best we can for our environment. Please let us have solar panels on both sides of the roof to help us help the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Fry, do you have a question?
Yes, it is. It's more about why do we need to reduce it down to half the building in light of the climate emergency we've declared?
Yes.
Can we have the whole roof done, please?
Yes. Well, what the answer to that question, Hugh will come in, but I mean that's what we're here to determine, whether or not we got two good causes before us today. One is that we shall have all the solar panels and that with the maximum climate change benefit. And then the other thing is that the heritage harm, which we're also obliged to consider, and we really do need to consider both of those things before we jump.
Chair, but if I can come in there, you talk about heritage harm to the building. If we haven't got a planet, we haven't got a building either.
No, but we are told by, no, I agree with you, but the point is we are told by our conservation teams that the harm will be dominant and visually intrusive in the street scheme, and that the harm will be considerable. So that's not nothing. That's not a thing we don't need to consider. That's what we're weighing up, and we need to consider it with care. And I take your point, but I would like others to come in. Phil, were you wanting to come in here and say something before I go to Councillor Heatley? You flicked on your screen.
Chairman, yes, please. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to remind committee of the balance that you need to undertake when there is harm or identified harm to a designated heritage asset. So it's not a normal planning balance. Where harm is identified, there's a statutory duty to have special regard. So that effectively you're starting with giving that harm great weight, and then you need a substantial public benefit which clearly and demonstrably outweighs that harm. So you're not looking at a simple ordinary planning balance that you would in other cases. You're effectively looking at a significantly weighted balance.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, because I know that these are very emotive subjects. Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. My question really relates to what Mr. Crowther has just said. I see in front of me a roof on a building which is not a designated heritage asset, and less than substantial harm happening to that roof. And as far as I'm aware, I don't have to give special weight to that because it is not designated. I also know that there are other designated assets in the area, like the listed buildings, and this presumably harms their setting, but they're some way away. Now, how do I weigh up those two things? Which of those is the one that is most important here? My instinctive reaction is that it's the immediate building itself, but I'd welcome some guidance on that.
Yes, that's very well put. Phil, could we have some guidance on that? Because yes, I mean, you've given us some. Could you give us a little more? I mean, this is we need to get this right and not do the knee-jerk reaction in either direction, because this is a little bit nuanced. So yes, Phil, could you give us a guidance about how much weight?
So thank you, Chair. So with non-designated heritage assets, it's a simple, but it's your ordinary planning balance between the harm to the non-designated asset and any other benefits. If you're looking at designated heritage assets, even if they are or harm to the asset or their setting, if it's designated, then you have to give that harm great weight, even if it's less than significant harm. So if there is harm to the setting of a designated heritage asset, then you have to give that great weight and you need substantial public benefit. So in short, non-designated heritage assets, if there's harm, ordinary planning balance, harm to a designated heritage asset or its setting, then it's a weighted balance. I hope that gives you the guidance.
It does. And then Hugh, our conservation officers are suggesting that this would do. I wrote down your works. It's they said it would be dominant, visually intrusive in the street scheme. So our conservation officers' view again is
the conservation officers' view was that panels on the east roof plane that we're looking at here would be unacceptable, but that the proposal would be acceptable if these panels were withdrawn from the scheme. The panels haven't been withdrawn from the scheme, so that they are before the committee for consideration. But my recommendation is a condition that would prevent their installation. Just going back to the previous question in terms of designated and undesignated assets, the school building itself is a non-designated heritage asset, but it is located within the designated conservation area, which is a designated heritage asset, and it is in the setting of other designated heritage assets, notably the listed building. The applicant's own heritage consultant is acknowledging that there is harm both to the conservation area, to the setting of some listed buildings, and to the heritage significance of the non-designated school building itself. The policy requirement is for that harm to be given great weight, and the statutory requirement effectively is that it should only be accepted if it's justified by and clearly and convincingly outweighed by public benefits associated with the development proposal. Those public benefits are primarily associated with the generation of renewable energy.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. So Councillor Rideout, do you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a comment. This is a very tricky one, and I fully understand where the school's coming from. But we've got to show a balanced judgment here. There clearly is harm to the conservation area. It's its building stands on the street scene. So I think in a way, because it's a Dorset Council application, we have to do the right thing. Otherwise, we're going to set a precedent. And so I'm balance, I go with the case officer's judgment that take off the panels facing the conservation area where there's greater impact and only on the, I guess, the rear elevation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that a proposal?
Yes, proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Call me stupid before I ask this question, but can somebody please explain to me, please tell me what the harm is, because I can't see any harm here at all. I could understand it if a something totally out of keeping with a designated heritage asset, for sake of argument, a green was taken off and a car park put in and tarmacked over. But I can't see that a reversible change to a roof can be viewed as harm, and that's my own personal view. And I just want to understand what those people who believe that harm is being created, can they tell me what that harm is?
Well, the people who believe that the harm is being created is Dorset Council's conservation officers. Yeah, so Hugh, if you would like to, could you go back to the wording that the conservation of, because and demonstrate what I mean. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Cook, that you personally don't think it would be harmful, and that's your view. That's fine, but the conservation officers did consider that it would be harm, and they explained what they meant by that. So I think that would help. Hugh, could you?
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Probably the most pertinent paragraph of the Conservation Office response reads, installing solar panels to both sides of the roofscape on this non-designated heritage asset will negatively impact the architectural and aesthetic significance, the asset setting, and the character and appearance of the conservation area. The former schoolhouse has a large roofscape that is highly prominent within the conservation area. Installing reflective solar panels across the length of the eastern slope will create a dominant, visually intrusive, incongruous element to the street scene. Overall, this will cause less than substantial harm to the significance and setting of the non-designated heritage asset, as well as the special character of the conservation area. The harm is primarily caused by the visual presence of the modernising element of the solar panels within the historic environment.
Sorry, can you just repeat that? Did you say less than significant harm? Less than significant harm.
The term is less than substantial, not less than significant.
Less than substantial. Thank you.
And just to remind members that less than substantial harm, it's a very misleading term for the layperson. Less than substantial harm is still given great weight when we're looking at a conservation area. So don't be misled by the phrase less than substantial. It doesn't mean not very important. We still give it great weight. I see that my network quality is just gone, so I hope you can still hear me. Moving on then to Brian Heatley, you wanted to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. As I think you have suggested, we are faced here with balancing two kind of incompatible things. They can't be very hard to measure against each other because they are different kinds of thing. Can I say something about each of them, which explains where I'm going to come out on the balance? The conservation officer, in talking about the effect of these panels on the eastern face of this roof, talks about them as being incongruous, dominant, visually intrusive. Now, I'd suggest that that is, first of all, it's pretty subjective, but also I think that the general reaction to solar panels is moving. As we see more solar panels, They are less incongruous because they are less usual. They are less visually intrusive because we've seen quite a lot of them and we begin to edit them out. And that the extent to which this does this harm is less than maybe the conservationist officer is suggesting, and is declining, that there is a different perception of it. On the other hand, we have to weigh the public benefit of generating some electricity in a renewable way. And I think once again, our perceptions of that are changing and have changed considerably in recent years, particularly with things like COP27 and so on and so forth. And that many of us and the public generally probably regard this as more and more important. So that in making this judgment, I'm afraid I come down very strongly on saying that I want to support this development, but without condition 3, so that we get the maximum benefit we can for something which I think most people will not particularly notice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very clear. Right. What I think I have to do, and Phil will correct me if I've had a proposer that we would adopt this application as with the condition. Do I have a seconder for that? Have I disappeared?
No, we can hear you, Chair.
No, but have I got a seconder that we should put this matter? Anybody prepared to second that? No. Oh, right. That's so I've no seconder for that. Could I have somebody to propose, please, that you would like to support this without the condition restricting the panels on the east face?
Chair, I will propose.
Brian, Councillor Heatley, I think you've proposed that, haven't you? Good.
Thank you.
Yes. And Councillor Cook, you'd like to second. So I've had a proposer, Councillor Heatley, and a seconder, Councillor Cook, that we put this to the vote, but without the, that's for the solar panels front and back. Right, if everybody's still with me, we will now put that to the vote. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Fry.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
For.
Councillor Carol Jones.
For.
Councillor Stella Jones.
For.
Councillor Emma Parker.
For.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I have to abstain as I lost my connection for part of the time during the presentation.
Right, Councillor Rideout.
Against.
Right, so that is carried then, that we have supported this application without the condition reducing the number of panels. Could I go now, please, to Anna Lee for your decision?
Thank you, Chairman, and I heard the full presentation and the debate. I would acknowledge that clearly the Minded 2 resolution here differs from the officer recommendation. In reaching my decision, I am taking account of the less than substantial harm that's identified to the non-designated asset and the designated asset of the conservation area. However, I do hear the views of the committee that this is perhaps at the lower levels of less than substantial harm, which needs to be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. And it's on that basis that I support the Minded 2 resolution of the committee, and this application will be approved without condition 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Yes. Moving on then to the next one, which is Stickland School. Hugh, your report on Stickland School, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, this is an application by Dorset Council relating to land owned by Dorset Council. So it's reported to committee in line with the council constitution, and there have been no objections to this application proposal.
Chair, I believe the officer's muted himself.
Yes, you're.
Apologies.
Sorry, I was looking at my papers. Thank you very much. Schoolboy error. Yes, on you go.
I'll start again, Chair. I'm not
Yes,
sure
please.
where I pressed the button. It's another application by Dorset Council relating to land owned by Dorset Council, so it's reported to committee in accordance with the Council's constitution. There have been no objections received in representations made to this application. Stickland's primary school is located on the eastern side of Summer Lane towards the southern edge of the village of Evershot. The school site is shown edged red on the submitted application location plan and extends to just under half a hectare. Between the school buildings and Summer Lane is the school playground. On the opposite side of Summer Lane are a number of residential properties. To the east of the school buildings is the school playing field and car park with open countryside beyond. And to the north is the Little Acorns Nursery and Forestry School and the Evershot Village Hall. The original school building dates from 1874 and is attached to a residential property known as School House that is in separate ownership. Both buildings are of stone construction with brick stacks and slate roofs. The buildings make a positive contribution to what is an attractive setting around an important junction of main routes within the village. Substantial extensions have been added to the rear of the original school building, which are of more utilitarian appearance, and a more recently constructed separate building, known as the Discovery Centre, has been erected on its southeastern side. The Discovery Centre is also of stone construction under a slate roof and features a front gable wall that echoes the design of the original school building. Behind the Discovery Centre is an outdoor swimming pool, and to its side is the school playing field, beyond which is the school drop-off area and car park. From locations along Summer Lane and in 4 Street, the school site is attractive and very well presented. The school site is located entirely within the designated Dorset Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, and the school buildings are entirely within the Evershot Conservation Area. As with the previous application, this slide shows the conservation area speckled blue and the listed buildings marked with red stars. Summer Cottage on the opposite side of Summer Lane is a Grade 2 listed building, and there are further listed buildings around the junction between Summer Lane and 4 Street. In exercising or performing any function in relation to or so as to affect land in an area of outstanding natural beauty, local planning authorities must have regard to the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the AONB. The national planning policy provides that great weight is to be given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty in AONBs, with the conservation and enhancement of wildlife and cultural heritage also important considerations in these areas. In the exercise of any functions under the Planning Acts with respect to any buildings or other land in a conservation area, special attention must be paid to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of the conservation area, and in considering whether to grant planning permission for developments which affect a listed building or its setting, the local planning authority must have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting, or any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses. National planning policy provides that in considering the impact of a proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, great weight should be given to the asset's conservation, and that any harm to or loss of the significance of a designated heritage asset should require clear and convincing justification, themes that are echoed in the development plan policies. The school and adjacent dwelling house are not statutorily listed buildings, but are identified in the Evershot Conservation Area as key unlisted buildings, and the Discovery Centre is praised within the Conservation Area appraisal as a handsome example of the use of traditional materials and architectural forms. The historic school buildings within the school site therefore constitute undesignated heritage assets, and the Discovery Centre is recognised as making a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the conservation area and the wider setting. The aerial photograph further illustrates the site context with the original school building, an attached dwelling, the later additions at its rear, the Discovery Centre and playing fields to the side, surrounding dwellings and open spaces to the north and east. The application proposal provides for the installation of a total of 94 solar panels to be installed on 7 arrays on various roof spaces, for the installation of 2 wall-mounted air source heat pumps to be located on the rear elevation of the Discovery Centre and associated infrastructure. Solar panels are proposed on the southwest facing roof plane of the original school building and on 3 southeast facing roof planes, including 2 pitch planes on the original school building and the southeast plane of the Discovery Centre, together with 3 arrays on flat roofed areas of the later additions to the original school building. The solar panels would be of standard manufactured design with a black frame and white backsheet. Pitched roofs, the solar panels would be mounted to lie flush with the roof planes and would be set back from the ridge line to avoid increasing the overall height of the building. On the flat roof planes, the panels would be mounted in frames to tilt them 10 degrees up from the horizontal. The prevailing policy context is set out in the application report. Policy Com 11 of the adopted local plan provides that proposals for generating heat or electricity from renewable energy sources other than wind will be allowed wherever possible, provided that the benefits of the development, such as the contribution towards renewable energy targets, significantly outweigh any harm. Policy Com 11 further states that permission will only be granted provided any adverse impacts on the local landscape, townscape or areas of historic interest can be satisfactorily assimilated, that the proposal minimises harm to residential amenity, and that adverse impacts on the designated wildlife sites, nature conservation interests and biodiversity are satisfactorily mitigated. Any adverse impact on amenity by reason of glint or glare is considered unlikely, and no adverse impacts on designated wildlife sites, nature conservation interests or biodiversity are anticipated. Information submitted in support of the application indicates that the solar panels would have a combined power generating capacity of approximately 32.43 kilowatts, resulting in an annual saving of approximately 6,710 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents, and that the air source heat pumps would have a generating capacity of approximately 22 kilowatts, resulting in a saving of 2,166 kilograms in carbon dioxide equivalents. The carbon savings associated with the proposed installations would therefore make a modest but nonetheless a valuable contribution to cutting greenhouse gas emissions, assist the transition to a low carbon future, and help to improve resilience. Information submitted in support of the application further indicates that the installations would also likely provide energy cost savings. Such cost savings would help to sustain the use of the historic school building for appropriate and publicly beneficial purposes. There are therefore small but meaningful public benefits weighing in favour of the granting of planning permission. As initially presented, the air source heat pumps were proposed on the front elevation of the Discovery Centre. However, the application proposal was amended to relocate these pumps to the rear elevation of the building, greatly reducing impact on the character and appearance of the school building and its setting. The solar panels proposed on the southeast facing roof plane of the original school building would be apparent in public views along Summer Lane, with further panels visible, further panels on the southwestern facing roof planes, plane here, here, and on the Discovery Centre, also open to view. Presence of the panels would have a modernising and detrimental impact on the appearance of the school, impacting its contributory role to the southern entry to the designated conservation area and historic setting more generally. Installation of panels on the later additions at the rear of the building, the original school building, and on the Discovery Centre would be less harmful and is considered to be acceptable. The heritage statement submitted in support of the application acknowledges harm to the heritage significance of the conservation area, to listed buildings, and to the school. The suggestion was made that the application proposal could be amended by the withdrawal of proposals for solar panels on the roof planes of the original school building, but the request made that the application be presented to for committee's consideration and subsequent determination. You have before you a written statement submitted on behalf of the applicant and also a written statement from the Eco Committee of the primary school. Harm to heritage significance of designated assets carries considerable weight and importance in decision making and is to be accorded great weight. In this instance, such harm is exacerbated by further harm to the heritage significance of non-designated key buildings within the conservation area. The recommendation is for a partial conditional grant of planning permission. As explained on the previous application, it is open to the council to issue a partial grant of planning permission with limitation imposed by means of planning condition, provided that such action is not prejudicial and so long as any change to the proposed development is not substantive in nature. As the recommended conditions only amend the proposed development by way of reduction, this being removal, prevention of panel installation here on this plane and on this plane, I'm satisfied that precluding the installation of solar panels on the pitched roof planes as recommended would not be a substantive change to the proposed development and that no third-party interests would be unacceptably prejudiced. With the imposition of the recommended conditions, I'm satisfied that the public benefits associated with the renewable energy generation would both justify and significantly outweigh the much lower level of harm arising from the less prominent installation, rendering what would otherwise be an unacceptable development acceptable. If the submission of the written statements to the committee, No further representations have been received, and there are no other updates to either the report or the application. It's recommended that the committee ought to be minded to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the report, and should recommend that the head of planning determines the application accordingly. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. George, what representations are we having? Is this another one from the school council?
Yes, it is. And then there's the one from Derek Moss, which was read out on the last application.
Yes, so if I could remember, the one we heard from Derek Moss refers to this as well. So if we could hear from the school council, please. Thank you.
Eco Committee. We, the children of Stickland Primary School, ask that you could reconsider the amount of solar panels installed in our school. We understand that in our idyllic conservation area, you may fear that it reduces our school building's appearance, but sadly our school will not have an appearance if we continue to let climate change prevail over us and do nothing to prevent it. So investing in solar panels would truly be a good addition to our beautiful area, with a positive outcome to the village as well. Yes, solar panels aren't the prettiest, but they would have several benefits to our school, including helping reduce the amount of fossil fuels we use. They are also more efficient, energy efficient. Imagine our conservation area with less fossil fuels. How many animals and their ecosystems will thrive greater than ever before. So when the future generation asks us why we didn't do anything about climate change whilst we still had the chance, what will we say? Simply, we couldn't be bothered, or yet another dismal excuse. So why don't we act now, as we still have the chance? By installing the solar panels, it will enable us to save money, so we'll be able to buy more resources. As a small school, all financial gains are incredibly important. And additionally, what can we buy? Maybe eco-friendlier. This is our school and we want to protect it. The more solar panels we have, the greater and more positive effect it has on our planet. Hopefully other schools will follow in our path if we get the desired amount. And then Dorset will be much more eco. Surely this is a good thing. So many children in our small school care about our beautiful planet and are looking to you to ensure the future of our natural area is secure and stable, a well-balanced ecosystem. Here are what the children said, and here are what the children in our school think. We wish for the total amount of solar panels so that the future generations have a better home. Nicola, year 5. I think that it is important that everybody has a valued life. The climate change that won't harm that. We are the children and our school is the future. We want to live happily. Felice, year 6. In conclusion, we ask you as a school and a community to reconsider the amount of solar panels you will give us, as the advantages are truly substantial for all. Yours sincerely, B, Chloe and Nicola, speaking on behalf of all the children at Stickland School.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, members, for clarification? I'm not seeing anybody. Well, again, we are asked to weigh up again whether the impact on the character, appearance and setting of the heritage assets in the conservation area, and whether the harm is significantly outweighed by the public benefit, and whether or not the harm, whether the reduction of the number of solar panels in this case, which is different than the last case, is significant enough. It seems to me that we are looking at a rather modest reduction in the number of solar panels being proposed by the officer this time. So does anyone have any comments? Yes, Mary Penfold, you'd like to speak. Councillor Penfold.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've listened to obviously all the arguments and I've listened to the arguments, obviously, and I've listened to what the pupils have said, and I think it's admirable that they care so much for the environment and for their school, and that they have written in and expressed a view. However, I have to agree with the planning officer and with his recommendations and with the partial condition granting. because I look at the visibility on that side when you come down from that street. So I would propose that we go with the officer's recommendation, Chairman. Thank you
very much. I think that's a point very well made, Councillor Penfold. I think members need to just have a look at this, the location of this building. It has rather more prominence within the conservation area than perhaps the previous one did. So Councillor Rideout, would you like to say something?
Sorry, Chairman, you caught me out then.
Sorry,
I agree with what Councillor Penfold has just said. I think this is entirely different application to the previous one because it's far more prominent in the street scene. So I would go with the officer recommendation.
Good, thank you very much. So I've had a proposer and a seconder that we go with the officer recommendation. Does anybody want to make any further comment? No, right. I'm not seeing anything. I'm now going to put this to a vote. The proposal is that we support this recommendation with the condition of to reduce the number of panels as recommended by the officer. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Fry.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
Against.
Councillor Carol Jones.
For.
Councillor Stella Jones.
For.
Councillor Emma Parker.
For.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
For.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
For.
Good, that's excellent. Thank you very much. I now turn to Anna Lee to give us your decision.
Thank you, Chairman. I confirm that this application will be approved in line with the committee's minded to resolution. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Committee, we have 2 more applications, so I'm going to just take the next one, if I may, and then we'll see if you feel you need a break before we go back to the Dorchester application. Agenda item 4G then. This is to erect a flat roof extension on 6 Culliford Road in Dorchester, and this application is before us because the applicant is an employee of Dorset Council. So we have Annabelle Cox. Do we have Annabelle Cox?
Chair, I'm going to present this one.
Thank you very much. Hannah Smith is going to present this report. Hannah.
Thank you. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, brilliant, thank you. So the application is for 2 small single-storey extensions to the rear of the property. The terrace property is located within the conservation area of Dorchester. You can see by the blue areas here. There are listed buildings and scheduled monuments, but they're at a significant distance away from the site. You can see by the red areas and the stars, and there wouldn't be any impact at all on the significance of those assets. So the application site is a terrace property here. You can see outlined in red. The 2 small extensions would be at the rear of the property. One infills a gap you can see between an existing 2-storey extension, and then there's a small extension that extends slightly further out from the building line there with a flat roof. So this is the front of the property. It's a characterful building located in the conservation area. The developments at the rear of the property, there's no impact at all, a neutral impact on the conservation area, no impact on its significance whatsoever. So this is an aerial view. You can see that there's various other extensions that have taken place along the rear of these buildings here. They have nice long gardens, plenty of space left after the development would take place. So these are the elevations. This is the existing elevations here. You can see it's already been extended at the back with quite a sizable extension there. And it's proposed to have a flat roof, small extension to the rear, which would infill the space to provide a larger kitchen area, and another extension to form a slightly larger washroom. So you can see the floor plans here. This is the infilled bit you can see to create the larger kitchen area, and then the small extension to the back In terms of the issues, there'd be no harm to the designated conservation area and its significance, no adverse impacts on residential amenity. The proposed design is modest in nature and similar to existing other extensions at the rear of the terraces. No objections were raised by any statutory consultees or neighbours to the site, and this application is before you due to the applicant being a Dorset Council employee. The application is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much indeed, Hannah. Before I go to Councillor Stella Jones for discussion, can I just clarify if there are any questions? Stella, I'm presuming yours is not a question.
No.
Lovely. I'll come to you in a sec. Councillor Hall, is yours a question?
Yes, mine is a question.
Go for it, please.
Point of clarification, or is this a misprint? We're asked to grant this because of the recommendation that it's in line with paragraph 14 of the MPPF. But paragraph 14 is about the provision of housing. This is not provision of housing, this is an extension. Can I have some clarification, please?
Sorry, what page? Where is that in the report? Councillor Hall, thank you for the question.
Item 3.0, reasons for recommendations, first one.
I should explain that Hannah Smith, this isn't Hannah's report, so that's why she's having to check that she's.
Yes, sorry, I'm just finding the place in the report. Apologies, Chair.
Yes. No, that's all right. I'm explaining that your report, you're giving this report on behalf of another officer. So, yes.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hall. You're correct. It should be the paragraph that relates to development being granted for unless there's specific policies that indicate otherwise, not in relation to housing provision.
No,
I presume that will be altered in any of the minutes.
You having drawn attention to it, it now will be put right. Very, very well spotted. Thank you very much. Yes, good. Councillor Jones.
Yes, as local member, I've got no objections to this. I'd like to move approval.
Thank you very much. Could I have a seconder, please?
Carol Jones, happy to second, Chair.
Councillor Carol Jones seconding. I'm not seeing any more need for discussion. Nobody's putting anything. I'll just give you a second. No, that's lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll move to the vote on this one now. Let's keep life simple. Councillor Andrews.
4.
Councillor Cook.
4.
Councillor Fry.
4.
Councillor Hall.
4.
Councillor Heatley.
4.
Carol Jones.
4.
Councillor Stella Jones.
4.
Councillor Emma Parker.
4.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
4.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
4.
That's splendid. Thank you very much. Members, we have one more item that we have to consider that was
Chairman, apologies.
Yes.
I think I need to make the decision. Apologies.
You do. Sorry, I'm running. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. Could we have that was our minded to decision. Could you please give us your decision, Anna Lee?
Thank you, Chairman, and I confirm that I agree with the minded to resolution of the committee, and my decision is this application will be approved. Thank you.
That's lovely. I was getting so anxious there because before we move on to the next agenda item, I need to establish whether there are members who are needing to leave the committee at 4 o'clock. Some of you said you needed it because I need to make sure that not too many of you are leaving.
Councillor Carol Jones, I have another meeting at 4 I'd like to attend if possible, please.
Right. Who else is leaving?
Carol, I'm due at that meeting, but I've also got an interest, or would like to have an interest in this Dorchester application.
Leave that meeting to me, Les, and I'll report back. Okay.
Thanks, Carol. Cheers.
No, so we have apologies from Carol Jones, and we already have Val Apothecary's apologies. Is anybody else leaving the meeting at this point? No, that's excellent.
Not at this point, Chair, but 5 o'clock I do need to go.
That's exactly. Committee, would you mind, given that we have people who need to leave later, are you comfortable that we press on with this last application rather than taking a break?
Yes.
I'm happy to take.
Yes.
Yes, happy, Chairman.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. I don't want to bully you, but I think if we can press on and get to the end, that will be
Chair,
helpful.
are you happy that I leave the meeting now before you start?
I am, yes, and thank you very much for your contribution, and I'm sorry you've had to leave us. And can we make a note that Councillor Jones left the meeting Carol Jones left the meeting at this point. Right, so we're now with agenda item 4C for a single-storey dance studio at Sandringham Sports Centre in Dorchester, and this was deferred this morning because officers needed to get some clarification on some information which they now have. So I understand this is Jenny Roberts is your report that you're going to present to us. Jenny, welcome. I hope you haven't been sitting all day waiting.
Not all day.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen if I may.
Thank you. Yes, we have it.
Right. Hopefully you can see my slideshow here.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So this application is for the erection of a single-storey dance school with mezzanine and a pitched roof in Sandringham Sports Centre in Dorchester. Here is the location plan. So you can see it's accessed off a residential road called Armada Way, and this is the sports centre here. We have the car park to the sports centre here. The Dorchester Pistol and Rifle Club is here. We've got the Bowls Club here. There's a play area down here, playing field, and there's a small petanque court here as well. And here's a close-up of the site plan. So you can see it's going to be located to the front of the shooting club, on top of the existing petanque court, and quite close to the Bowls Club. And here's the aerial view of it. So again, we've got the car park here, and it's going to be sited in this area here. This is what it's going to look like. So this is the front elevation with the entrance here. It's going to have standing seam polyester powder coated aluminium coated cladding. And this is the rear, which faces towards the Rifle Club. And these are the side elevations. So you can see it's a bit higher at the back because you've got the mezzanine level for storage in here. So these are the sections showing the store area in the mezzanine. This is the floor plan of the proposed dance school. So you can see there's a large studio and a smaller studio. There are a number of changing rooms for staff, boys and girls. There's a waiting room, small kitchen, reception area, and the store at the back. And here's a proposed view of the building, so it's sort of more of an idea of what it would look like. It is in an area of some flood risk. It's in flood zone 1, but it has some risk of surface water flooding. However, it is a leisure use, so it's classified as less vulnerable under the technical guidance of the MPPF, so it is appropriate development in this location. A sequential test has been carried out in that alternative sites within Dorchester have been investigated by the applicant, but none met with the requirements of the dance school, particularly with regard to the provision of a safe drop-off for students, which is obviously quite important. The conclusion that they reached is that there are no alternative available and suitable sites which have a lower flood risk. A flood risk assessment was carried out on behalf of the applicants, and a surface water drainage scheme was devised. The surface water runoff from the new building will be infiltrated to the ground via a new soakaway. This has been shared with our flood risk management team at Dorset Council, who are satisfied that flood risk can be satisfactorily mitigated, subject to a condition for a detailed drainage scheme being attached to any grant of planning permission. The conclusion is that the scheme offers betterment over the existing situation, and that the risk of flooding from surface water to both the development site and adjacent buildings will be reduced. Here is the proposed drainage strategy layout, which shows the soakaway here to be located under some of these car parking spaces, and you can see the flow of the surface water runoff or heading towards this soakaway. Onto photographs of the site. This here is Armada Way, which, as you can see, is a very residential area. So it's accessed up here, and this is the entrance at the end of this view here into the car park. And these gates here, if you look back, this is the view back down Armada Way. And then you can see on this car here is this car here. So we're just looking back down towards the entrance of that road. And on into the site. This is looking forward. So you've got the rifle club here, which is underneath this bund. It's an underground rifle range and small building here. You have the petanque court here, which Dorchester Town Council has undertaken to replace prior to any development commencing, so that we don't lose that facility. There are a row of cottages just here related to the farm next to it, so they will be the closest residential properties to the site. In this photograph, you can see the Bowls Club, which is quite an extensive building. And these little, I don't know if you can make them out very well, these little tiny cones, etc., where a local motorcycle school trains its students for its motorcycle test. Moving on to this picture down here, you can see just in the corner there's a children's play area, and then further to the left of this photograph, which you can't see, is a playing field. This photograph was taken on a different day, which shows there's obviously something going on at the Bowls Club here. So there's some cars parked here, unlike in this photo, where it's a very empty car park. Yes, just more photographs that just show me sort of areas that I've mentioned, and these houses again, close up of the Pistol and Rifle Club. And just moving round to different views. This is looking back down towards Armada Way and the entrance here. This is again a similar view, just taking in a bit more, and you can see a bit more clearly here the bollards and cones set out for the Rifle Club. Not the Rifle Club, apologies, the motorcycle school. And yeah, more photographs, just sort of trying to set the scene a bit more. So we have the principle of development, which is considered acceptable. It's in a defined development boundary, so it's in a sustainable location within an existing sports facility. So it's considered that it's an appropriate location for such development. In terms of visual amenity, it's considered that the building fits in with the character of the Bowls Club next to it, and that it doesn't detract from the surrounding area. In terms of residential amenity, it's an established established sports centre. There will be some additional traffic obviously going to and from the site, because there will be more people using the site than existing, but it's considered that that would be acceptable given their wider state roads. In terms of access and parking, as just mentioned, it's got a good access, which in an established area, plenty of parking. There is local concern that it will result in some parking on the road during very busy times, which is acknowledged. However, there are no parking restrictions in the area, and the highway officer has no concerns or objections to this. We've discussed flooding already, and it's considered that a suitable scheme can be provided to mitigate against any flood risk. We have had various representations made, both supporting and objecting to the proposal, as set out in the officer report. Some of the other other key planning matters raised, as I've already mentioned, Dorchester Petanque Club was quite concerned about losing its facility, but Dorchester Town Council has undertaken to provide that elsewhere within the site. The Pistol and Rifle Club had quite a bit of concern about the flooding, which I've covered earlier. They were also concerned that because they've got an underground bunker, that the foundations of the dance school could undermine their facility. However, that would be a private civil matter. It would all be subject to building regulations anyway, so it's not a planning matter to consider. The motorcycle school, quite understandably, is concerned because it will be positioned where they do their training. However, it is only going to be built on a small area of that car park, and there's still lots of car park left. And I guess that would be for Dorchester Town Council to come to some sort of arrangement over. There were some ownership issues raised by the Bowls Club. They are owners of their site because they have a very long lease on the site. However, they feel that we should, or that the applicants should have notified them formally of the application, and also the Rifle Club also being owners. We have run this past our planning lawyer, who has looked at the leases and can't see any reasons why they should have been notified at that stage, and it is considered that the application is valid and lawful. Some of the objections related to renewable energy and there not being any renewable energy at the site. The applicants have since had solar panels added to their plans and an air source heat pump to help mitigate those concerns. Just thinking if there is anything else. I believe we've got a couple of representations coming up from some members of the public, but the recommendation is that planning permission is granted subject to conditions set out in the report and the archaeological condition that was set out in the update sheet.
Thank you very much indeed, Jenny. That's very clear. Lovely. So we do, as you say, have some representations, which we're now going to hear. We have, I think, one from the Bowls Club, one from the Rifle Club, one from Councillor Molly Rennie, the ward member, and one from the applicant. Nicola, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Colin Lawley, Chairman, Dorchester Bowls Club. We are surprised this application has been listed for hearing when, as far as we are aware, you have not adjudicated upon our submission that the application is not valid for failure to comply with the statutory obligation to serve notice on all owners having an interest in the application site. The description owner means someone having freehold interest or a leasehold interest with at least 7 years unexpired in the application site. The reference to the application site includes all land necessary to carry out the proposed application, e.g. land required for access to the site from a public highway, landscaping, car parking and open areas around buildings. The rather draconian wording of sections 65(5) and 327A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 states that local planning authorities must not entertain applications where statutory requirements notify owners and certify they have done so have not been met. In the 2018 case of Bishop versus Westminster Council, the court warned that all involved in the planning process should make sure all title issues are considered and the ownership certificate completed correctly. Recklessness and cavalier disregard of mandatory requirements can lead to permissions being quashed, and as a decision in this case where due care had not been taken. As soon as Dorchester Bowls Club and Dorchester Rifle Club became aware of the application, the council were notified there was an ownership certificate issue, but chose to ignore this on being advised by the town council they were the only owner required to be served, despite they having granted the leases to both clubs with more than 7 years unexpired. These leases granted both clubs parking rights over the whole of car park, including the area now sought to be excavated and built upon. These leases required each lessee to bear a proportion of the cost of the repair and maintenance of the whole of the car park, and the Rifle Club building is built on the site and will be overshadowed by the proposed ballet school. Despite the report of case officer acknowledging that the bowls and rifle clubs are owners, the report continues to assert that our submission of invalidity relates to non-service upon the Duchy of Cornwall, the previous freehold owners. We have made it clear this statement is untrue. We continue to assert that the application is invalid for failure to comply with statutory requirements when the relevant information was and has been at all times available to the applicant, the agents and the council with the benefit of due care and attention. Right, this is Richard Burden, Chairman, Dorchester Rifle and Pistol Club. Dorchester Rifle and Pistol Club has made a number of submissions since the application was made, and it's still very concerned that the online application file makes no mention of the club's planning permission 22nd of the 12th 1989, which is a material consideration as an immediate neighbour, and it requires a specific number of unidentified car parking spaces to be set out. Neither the applicant nor the architect have accepted invitations to meet and discuss the proposals and the potential impacts on our premises. Surface water flooding of our premises has occurred twice in the past decade, and the proposal will increase runoff and increase risks to our buildings. Despite identifying this issue months ago, neither the architect nor the case officer has sought details from DRPC. The drainage report admits no survey has been done, surely a significant shortcoming, and the proposed drains run uphill. The Ballet Club has insufficient parking for its needs at its current site. The Highway Authority has failed to follow MPPF 2021-104E and 108 guidance, as the proposed reduces the available parking, increases parking demand and puts pressure on off-site street parking. There is no provision MPPF 112E for charging of plug-in and other ultra-low emission vehicles. The proposed building is unnecessarily high, industrial in style, and is orientated to obliterate the open grassy bank. The proposed scale, cladding and colour will be depressing, whereas reorientating by 90 degrees along the eastern boundary would retain the green space and provide a more comfortable fit to the location. In failing to ascertain relevant facts, the agent appears to have been avoiding doing all the constructive things that should be done when seeking to promote a community facility, namely talking with neighbouring clubs, facilities, to seek to find a solution they can call support, that all can support. It is also worrying that attention to relevant detail is missing from your committee report, in that both the name and acronym for this club are consistently wrong. That does not inspire confidence. Furthermore, the council cannot choose to opt out of its responsibilities and liabilities for flooding and damage to the DRPC premises. If it approves a submitted application, it will be held liable. DRPC asks the committee to A, defer its decision, and B, instruct the applicant to discuss with neighbours a scheme that the clubs and nearby residents can support. And this is Leslie Cocker, Dorchester Ballet and Dance. Dorchester Ballet and Dance has been providing not-for-profit affordable dance classes to people of all ages for over 60 years, and became a registered charity. Number 1087930 in 2000. The school's founder vowed bringing dance to all, regardless of age, wealth or ability. Unable to find suitable premises, the charity currently rents an industrial unit, but the building is small, ageing and inaccessible for many users. A purpose-built facility would allow the dance school to meet the changing health and wellness needs of the local community, as well as unmet demand. With current and future housing allocations, Dorchester continues to grow, creating greater need. Dorchester Town Council has been aware of our search for premises over several years and offered this site in a parking area for which they hold the freehold. They have confirmed that no other party has any rights within the site that would be affected by the development. The Sandringham site has 120 parking spaces. the Town Council have confirmed that parking in the area rarely exceeds 2/3 of its capacity, while up to 15 spaces will be lost as a result of the building. Many of these will be replaced by remarking the area. The charity's current premises have use of 11 parking spaces, which are very rarely full. The dance school's location on Poundbury Industrial Estate makes it difficult for families to walk to their classes. Relocation close to schools and a residential area will increase students' walking and cycling opportunities. The charity will not require coaches to access the site. Water runoff from the roof will be addressed by a new soakaway drainage. A drainage strategy has been outlined by consultants, gap and filtration tests undertaken. I understand that a previous flooding event to the Rifle Club was resolved by maintenance to existing drainage. Insulation will meet current building regulations, which will also mitigate noise. Construction will be by a reputable building firm and the project overseen by Crick May Stark Architects. Denture Consulting Engineers will be responsible for elements of structure, including foundations, and these will be designed to avoid damage to adjacent buildings. Construction will also need to meet building controls. Dorchester Ballet and Dance is committed to green initiatives and is exploring the inclusion of solar panels, air source heat pumps and EV charging facilities. Low Carbon Dorset will be consulted until the conclusion of their programme. The studio's outward appearance and hours of use are in keeping with the existing leisure facilities at the site. Thank you for the opportunity to address questions raised by local residents and businesses.
Thank you very much.
One more.
Yes, please, from Councillor Rennie.
Yep. The community using and having used the ballet club for many years are at last close to securing a home of their own after having moved from the Grove many years ago. This enabled the Arts Centre to have a home. They have moved around many sites in Dorchester during all the time raising money for their own property so as not to be in the hands of landlords to continue their hugely successful club. The plan was they would go into the Brewery Square maltings, but that all came to sad end, as we all know. The Dorchester Town Council have been able to help them in these efforts by enabling them to come to the Sandringham Sports Centre site due to it being completely in their ownership, just as they helped the bowling club and the Rifle and Pistol Club to do exactly the same many years ago. It is a perfect site with its own parking, which is underused unless there is a tournament happening within the bowling club. No roads for children to cross and safe for pick up and drop off. There has been an issue with flooding on the site, with heavy rain at times running off into the Rifle and Pistol Club. This new development gives an added bonus of helping to mitigate this issue, as the ballet club have planned in. This new development gives the added bonus of helping to mitigate this issue, as the ballet club have planned in flood mitigation work and soakaways. This should save the R and Pistol Club some money and the issues they have suffered in past times with flooding. Wherever the ballet club have tried to go, there has been an issue due to lengths of leases, parking, ownership. At last, it looks as though through partnership partnership working, we have the opportunity to help bring another community facility to this site. I do hope you will be able to support this project. Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, Thank you very much. There's been a lot of reading. Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Before I go to questions, Jenny, are there any of the points that have been raised in those submissions that you'd like to comment on? I think you've clarified for us that the legal advice is that the application is valid. The yes. Point was made, and you've talked about the drainage and flooding issues.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't believe there are any other issues. No. I think they're the main two that were raised.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, thank you. I'm now going to go to questions and invite Councillor Stella Jones to ask her question.
Yeah, as the other local member, I also support the Ballet Club in looking for new premises. I'll just put back in. But there are one or two aspects of this application that need talking about. So I've got about 5 different questions. First of all, you say that it's in keeping with the area, but if you look at the bowling club, we can put a photo of it. The bowling club is a very low white building. If you can go back, it's white, it's light, it's brick on the bottom and then light. And then if you look beyond, you can just about see beyond the railway line, there are some white buildings on the other side of the railway line. And what we are asking here is that we're going to introduce a very large dark coloured industrial building. If you just look at the photograph of the building that we're proposing, it's a very dark coloured, there we are, industrial looking building. Now can we ask that this building is built with very pale white or very pale green instead of this dark grey, because I think this dark grey would just dominate the building and take away all the aspect of light and openness. That's the first question.
Let's address that question. I suspect that's going to be too significant to change the application. Jenny, your response to that, to change the colour of this building?
Yes, I would agree. It would be quite a significant change. Also, I would say this is although it is a taller building, it's quite a bit smaller than the Bowls Club building, which is, if I try and show the, back to the location plan or site plan. So yeah, the proposed dance school is going to be going in this area here. It's not taking up the entire bit, so it's significantly smaller in ground area than this very large Bowls building. Yeah, I guess it's something that obviously people will have their opinions about as to whether it's acceptable. I think you've got a lot of industrial buildings to the rear of the railway, as can be seen here. And yes, it's a matter for members to decide whether they think it's acceptable or not really.
Yes, quite right. Sorry,
you can hardly see the industrial buildings on the other side of the railway line.
I think the response to your question is still, no, we can't ask for it to be a different colour at this point. We either find it acceptable in that grey. I mean, the application is the application before us, and it's either acceptable in that grey or it's not. But we can't say it would be acceptable if it was white, because it's not white. Next question.
Next question is a lack of landscaping. If you look at the view from Armada Way, you had some photographs there. When you're walking down Armada Way or living in Armada Way, you look as you're walking into the car park, you see the greenery of the Rifle Club. You see behind there's some trees. You can even see St George's Church Tower. It's a very open green space. And yet we're not asking for any greenery to replace that which will be lost when you put that big building in front of the bunker there. Can I ask why we can't have some landscaping?
Jenny, could we have some landscaping?
I'm not entirely sure where it would go, because a lot of concerns have been raised in relation to car parking spaces being eaten up, and I would have thought that landscaping would result in more car parking spaces being eaten up. There is still significant greenery there. We couldn't actually see the church. Both myself and my team leader took separate visits to the site, and we weren't able to see the church.
Well, I see it every day I walk down there.
Within the car park?
From in the car park, over the top of the white buildings beyond the railway line, and that is just up there is the church tower.
Okay. Yeah, we did have a look for it after we spoke about it, but yeah, I think any landscaping requirements would take up more car parking spaces, which has already been raised as a concern by people.
Is it possible to have some kind of creepers going up the building, which take very little space, but they cover up the building eventually?
Possibly. I'm not a landscape architect or expert myself, so
I'm trying to get back the idea of greenery in the area.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand.
Could that be looked at?
Yes.
Well, can we condition? There's not a landscape condition with this one, is there?
No, but could we have a landscape condition?
Hannah, are you there? Just wonder if I could defer to Hannah, please.
Yes, please. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question, Councillor. I think Jenny's right that there is limited opportunity for significant landscaping. We could look to include some soft landscaping along the front of the building, as you suggest. It probably be quite limited, but there might be the opportunity to have some planters and some, like you say, climbing plants potentially along the front of the building. But what impacts that will have on sort of the wider sort of view of the building, I'm not certain, because as Jenny's pointed out, the land around it will remain green and there are trees around the site still. So I think you could consider a landscaping condition if you felt it was necessary, but I think it's going to be limited in terms of what we could achieve unless we were to remove parking spaces, which would be a different proposal to this, and not something that's supported locally from the representations that we've had.
Yeah, I would be a bit nervous of planters because, first of all, they also take up car parking space, but also they have to be properly maintained, and they, you know, my experience of planters in public spaces, they can very quickly become a bit of an eyesore, and I'm not sure they really would address Stella's point about the lack of landscape, you know, big greenery. I don't know what you think, Stella. I'm not sure planters would really help.
It's just a lack of green. Maybe we could paint some trees on the building.
Yeah. Yes.
Make it green. Yeah. Right. Can I move on to the next question?
Yes,
then,
please
which
do.
is about
Yes.
parking. Now, the views of this car park must obviously have been taken when COVID had closed down the bowling club, because every day there are cars parked in there. But I'm concerned about the rifle club. We don't want anyone having to carry rifles from the edge of the car park or even on the public roads down to the rifle club. Can we have a condition that there are places left for the rifle club? I don't know how many they need, even a couple, so they can actually carry their weapons safely.
Jenny, who owns the car park?
The car park is owned by the town council. Yes.
So would that be a matter with the town council? I'm not sure we could impose it.
No, I don't think we could, because we're not. No.
I think that's a matter of the town council. Good suggestion, Stella, but one for the town council. Yeah,
I'll take you up with them. Now, the road leading to the Armada Way, which leads to the car park, if you can go back to that road, it has actually, you can just see where the car is parked on the bottom picture. There is a national cycleway across this road and a very busy public footpath. And if the cars are going down, I think we need perhaps some signage on the road itself, saying, you know, perhaps coloured lines saying this is an important cycle route, important pedestrian way, because otherwise you don't really notice that you can't see it both edges because of the housing both sides, and cyclists could nip across there without really being seen. So, you know, if there was a notice saying a cycle route and pedestrians and something painted on the road, can we ask the highway to do that as a condition?
I think it's outside the scope of this
Is that
application,
outside
so it's
the
not within
scope
the
as well?
ownership. Yes, it's outside the red line.
Because it could be very dangerous there.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
And the last question I've got is, you don't have any operating times, any conditions for?
No. Yeah, I don't know if you saw within the report. I'm just trying to bring my report up so I can actually read it. Remember exactly what I wrote. If you just bear with me, please.
Yeah, the bowling club. I know that there are no restrictions on the bowling club.
Yeah, so if I bring that across, actually, it may be easier so that everybody can actually read with me. The applicant explained in her letter of the 23rd of October that currently these are the timetabled hours, and it's only sort of runs, the classes only run during school term times, generally speaking. So there are 35 weeks of the year where classes run, and the other 17 is very much reduced. But they also carry out a number of off-timetable low-key activities which involve use of the studio at other times of the week. So sometimes they have quizzes and flower arranging workshops. Sometimes there are private hirers who hire for a couple of hours for children's birthday parties, etc. and they have rehearsals every couple of years for their shows that they put on at the Pavilion or the Hardy School. So there are various additional modest uses of their facility which they'd like to continue. And it was felt that they've requested that they don't have any opening hour restrictions put on there, which would be in line with the surrounding properties at the Bowls Club and the Rifle Club. And it would seem unreasonable to put those restrictions on given the low-key uses. We have got a condition on there saying what the uses would be for, and that would be for the old D2 leisure and recreation uses, which don't include firearms or motorised vehicles, etc. So yes, that's why there isn't a condition suggested on the in the report.
And I'm reading what they're going to do. It seems fine. However, the gate to the car park is closed every night at 10 o'clock. So everything it does finish at 10 o'clock. But if there was, for instance, a birthday party in the bowling club and people wanted to go until 11 o'clock, they could park outside the area and walk into the ballet club to have a party. And I think we have to have a restriction at 10 o'clock at night for anything at all, so that we don't disturb neighbours. As I say, most things would be happening before then, and the gate would be closed, but there's a lot of pedestrian access to this place, and I think we ought to just restrict anything after 10 o'clock.
Okay, yeah, that's up to members. I don't see why that can't be done if that's what members.
Are there similar restrictions on the other clubs?
Well,
not that I could see, no.
But the bowling club is a very, very quiet thing. They
Yes.
don't have parties. The playing bowl is very quiet, and they do, as I say, they all finish before 10 o'clock because that's why the gate is closed then. And obviously, footballers don't play usually in the dark at 11 o'clock at night. But I'm just thinking about the occasional rowdy party that could possibly take place there.
I would value some advice whether I mean, I hear what you say. I'm just trying to probe whether or not how reasonable it would be to put a condition of hours on one of the clubs when there are 3 or 4 clubs on that site. Would that be reasonable? And is it necessary in order to make this planning application acceptable? Hannah or Phil, do you feel this would be reasonable?
I think the nature of the use doesn't lend itself to necessarily parties on here, so I think we might be slightly unreasonable in that approach because it's a dance studio and it's a use that's pretty compatible with the surrounding residential uses, and that's why Jenny hasn't proposed limits on the hours of operation. I think it seems a little bit arbitrary to put 10 o'clock on there for a use that doesn't actually form part of the application, I'd say. It's down to councillors if you feel that it would be required, but I think
I have to say
it's probably not really related to the use in a way that would be necessary to make it acceptable. Especially because the other uses
birthday parties.
The other uses haven't got any restrictions on, and there hasn't been any issue with that. So it would be an anomaly in planning terms to condition this club and not the other clubs. And there's no indication that parties would be carried out here because the use is a dance and ballet studio.
Yeah,
not
I think
a general
that parties were mentioned, Hannah, just as
sorry,
yeah,
Jenny.
just for no, it's okay. No, it's for children's birthday parties.
It's children's birthday parties was what was being talked about. Yes, absolutely.
I think if that's the case, then you could have an end limit because children's parties I didn't think would normally go until 10 o'clock. That seems reasonable.
I'm just uncomfortable about. I'm not sure that we have really good planning grounds to put a restriction on when there are other the gate is locked and the other clubs don't have a restriction. I'm not feeling in my bones that that's very reasonable. I'm seeing some comment in the comment bar from other members who are agreeing with me that it doesn't feel reasonable. Can we park that one for a moment, Stella, because I don't think you're getting committee support for that one, and move on to your next question.
Well, they're my questions.
That's lovely. Okay, thank you. So we haven't forgotten it. So can we have a question from Councillor Hall and then Councillor Rideout?
Thank you, Chairman. 3 points. Firstly, very similar to the last application, can we look at changing the reference to paragraph 14 of the MPPF in 3.0, reasons for recommendations, because I believe that to be wrong. Questions 2 and 3, I think, are for Phil Crowther, really, because they're more legal. I appreciate that we've said that this is a valid legal application, but can he just confirm what I've always been led to believe, that you don't actually need to own land to do a planning application? And the third question is, there's quite a few comments in this planning application about, shall we say, who does and who doesn't have rights over car parking spaces. Is that a civil matter, or is that for us to actually consider? Thank you.
Car parking spaces, we addressed that a moment ago. No, that's a matter for the town council. It's out with our planning application here today, but the town council can certainly could sort some of that. Phil, can you just give us some comfort that we can be absolutely confident that this application is valid in the light of the question marks that have been raised by resident submissions, please?
Chair, thank you. So to answer Councillor Hall's question directly, yes, providing the correct notices are served, anyone can apply for planning permission on any land, whether they own it or not. So I could apply to demolish Councillor Hall's house and rebuild it. Whether I could do that or not would depend on Councillor Hall selling me the land or allowing me to do it. A colleague of mine has given advice that the application is valid, and so that's the advice that you have.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're happy with that, Matt? Good. Yes, thank you very much. Okay. I have nobody else asking to speak. Has anybody? These were questions. Do we want to move on to comments? Anyone like to make a proposal about this?
Can I ask about? Sorry, I should have put my thing.
No, I can't. Councillor Rideout, did you want to say something?
Please.
You came up
yes,
first.
please, Chairman. I mean, I've obviously listened to everything and I've read the report. And being an ex-ballet dancer myself, I think what an absolutely fantastic facility for Dorchester. And I have no hesitation. I say I've heard everything and I'm very satisfied and be happy to propose. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Can I have a seconder for that?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Thank you. If we have nothing else, then I have nobody else in the chat bar. So if we can move on to put that to a vote. If we're all comfortable with that, nobody else coming up in anything else in the chat bar.
Only that you wouldn't let me have a landscape condition.
Sorry.
I'd still like a landscape condition if possible. Right.
Thank you, Stella. Yeah, thank Councillor James. Right. The proposer and the seconder, are you minded to explore a possibility of a landscape condition or not?
Chair, although I understand why Councillor Jones would like a landscape conditions, I'm also conscious I know the area pretty well. And that parking would be restrictive on that. I like the idea of exploring some climbers going up the side, but I'm not sure we can condition that.
I don't think. No. Okay, that's very helpful. So you're not a Councillor Rideout. How do you
Chairman,
feel?
I think the same as Councillor Fry. I don't think there's the room, but maybe there's room for a living wall. I don't know.
Maybe as the local member, Councillor Jones could explore that with the owners there and see if they can put something in that climbs the wall itself as a voluntary thing to help fit in and blend in with the location.
I think that would be a helpful approach. I'm not picking up that this is very easy for us to condition from the planning committee because it hasn't been discussed with the developer.
Go with what's in front of it.
and we
I should take it elsewhere.
I would like you to do that, Councillor Jones, because we really do. One of the rules is that we have to decide on the application as it is before us, not as we would like it to be. And so yes, I'm sure that you could explore that elsewhere. And Phil, did you want to come in here with something loyally, or are we ready to go to vote?
Chair, just something quickly. Thank you on that. I mean, landscaping is something that's normally conditioned. The issue is whether you need climbers to make the development acceptable or not. And if the development is acceptable as it stands without, then it's not necessary to impose that condition. Conversely, if it is necessary, then it would be potentially reasonable to impose that condition. Yes. But you know, at the moment, in terms of the proposition before the proposal before the committee, as I understand it, it didn't form part of the proposal as proposed and seconded. So.
Exactly so. So thank you very much. So I mean, I think I have a proposer and a seconder that consider that the proposal is acceptable as it is, and so that's what we're now going to vote on. If you're all ready, when I call your names, if you will tell me whether you are for or against. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Cook.
For.
Fry.
For.
Hall.
For.
Heatley.
For.
Carol Jones. Oh, I beg your pardon. I knew she was. Stella Jones.
For.
Emma Parker.
For.
Mary Penfold.
For.
And Belinda Rideout.
For.
Good, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Could we now turn to Anna Lee for your decision? You've heard our discussion and are minded to. Anna?
Thank you, Chairman. I confirm I heard the presentation and the debate, and I consider that the concerns raised and representations have been given full consideration. I concur with the minded to resolution of the committee, and so this application will be approved subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Good. Members, you'll be very pleased to know that we have no urgent business and no exempt business. So that brings our deliberations to a successful end at 16:41. That was a long meeting, but I think a very productive one. We spent a lot of time talking, but I don't think much of it was waffle. So thank you very much indeed for your attention and your time today. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the officers, because I know when we have a long meeting, you've had long weeks and weeks beforehand preparing for a big meeting like this. So thank you all very much indeed. And I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you.